that since there is a war on, they don't want to lose it. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, St. Petersburg.
Let's get more now. We can bring in Matthew Schmidt, Associate Professor of National Security and Political Science at the University of New Haven. We heard there Vladimir Putin essentially saying there's no point in having this face-to-face meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, as he kind of requested in this open letter. What do you think? Do you think more talks actually could help anything at this point? And what's the likelihood that we see any sort of negotiations between the two sides right now?
Thanks for having me on. I think that Russia is in trouble. They are facing a production cliff this fall. They're running out of their Soviet-era stock of weapons and equipment, and they're going to reach a point where their production lines have to produce what they need for the month that they're producing, right? And that's going to be tight if they're any kind of a fallback. So they need to push through this summer and try to, sort of knock out Ukraine, or at least secure what they have and force negotiations. What Zelensky is doing by throwing out this letter is positioning Putin into a corner and forcing Putin to say, no, we're not gonna negotiate, and then hopefully come back at the end of the summer and have Putin in that corner to be able to negotiate now on Ukraine's terms.
Well, in terms of Ukraine's terms, Mr. Zelensky sent that letter Thursday. You mentioned kind of where Russia's at. What about where Ukraine is at? And do you think that Ukraine feels like it sees momentum, maybe for the first time in a long time, shifting in its own favor?
Well, the first thing that Ukraine has done is it's used its tech advantage and its morale advantage with its troops to freeze the battlefield, right? This is a drone war now, and it's a drone war because Ukraine made it a drone war. They forced Russia to play its game, and they're winning at it right now. And so what's happening is the combat effectiveness of Russian units is absolutely plummeting because nobody can move in the no man's land. They're getting picked off by Ukrainian drones. So Ukraine has sort of stabilized the manpower problem that it had from the beginning of the war. And, when Putin gets up and he gives this speech at the end and says, thank you to Russian servicemen who are on the front line, that's kind of a lie, because a lot of the folks who are on that front line are there for the money. They're realizing when they're out there that they're not likely to survive. And so that's why their combat effectiveness is going down. And the Russians who aren't being recruited into this don't see that yet, but it's starting to leak out, right? That idea of what the front line really is starting to compare it to ordinary Russians.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? I mean, how is this war being seen in Russia? Because on top of what you mentioned, there was this analysis by the UK intelligence agencies that found that Russia has likely lost 500,000 soldiers. Bloomberg reporting that the Kremlin's finance officials have told Vladimir Putin bravely that the war is becoming financially unaffordable.
They're losing a lot of lives. That's getting harder and harder to hide from the key populations in Moscow and St. Petersburg, which are not where the conscripts are coming from. Secondly, their war economy is tanking. Their GDP is going down a little less than 2% right now. And everything that they're producing is essentially getting blown up on the front, right? All their air defense, all their drones and things like that. So it's not adding to the long-term value of the economy, and it's starting to become untenable. And again, that's what's pushing them to end this thing this year.
We also saw this week, didn't we? And this was in the U.S. Lawmakers in the House approved a new $8 billion aid package for Ukraine. It also included a fresh round of sanctions on Russia. 18 Republicans actually voted in favor of it. It still has to go to the Senate. It would still have to be approved by President Trump. But, how significant do you think that would be? What signal do you think this sends about American support for Ukraine?
It's hugely important for Ukraine, and probably more important as a signal to force Putin to that negotiating table, more than anything else. We'll see how it works its way through, though.
Matthew Schmidt, Associate Professor of International Affairs at the University of New Haven. Great to get your thoughts tonight. We appreciate it.